Good morning. A good Monday morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Touch. The Morning Touch is brought to you by the Chaplaincy for the Homeless and the FSBC in Glendale. You know, this morning, this quiet morning, we call Memorial Day. It should be a day of reflection and not recreation. Because when you think about Memorial Day, I'm reminded of how many thousands and thousands of our U.S. troops gave their lives so that we might enjoy the freedom that we enjoy in this country. Memorial is a word that has a special meaning. It means simply moments frozen in time for our reflection. Today is one of those days. Memorial Day is a day where a moment is frozen in time for our reflection. And we think about all of those who've given their lives for our freedom. And we must never forget the price of freedom. You know, the Bible has lent itself to this concept all throughout, especially when you examine the Old Testament. There were memorials all throughout the Old Testament where God called on the people to be reminded of his goodness and reminded of his glory. One such place is in Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 21. It is the account of the 12 memorial stones that were placed at the Jordan. I'm going to focus on verse 8 because for the sake of time. And the people of Israel did as Joshua commanded and took up stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them with them to the place where they lodged and laid down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant stood. And they are there to this day. 12 memorial stones. And you say, what's the significance of 12 memorial stones? Well, they had come out of Egypt. They had been in the wilderness. God had protected and provided for them. And now, as they cross the river Jordan into the promised land, the Lord told Joshua what to do. And in doing so, it became a reminder for the people of God about the goodness of God. Israel was reminded to remember the mighty hand of God, his authoritative power, his goodness, how he protected them, how he provided for them, how he gave them victory after victory on their journey. The 12 stones were a memorial that was to be remembered, not by only the people who crossed the Jordan. They were charged by God for all of the tribes to remember. No tribe was left out. No person was left out. The memorial preserved not only the knowledge of God, but the miracle of what the Israelites had just experienced. And not only for that generation, but it preserved the knowledge of God and the respect for God for generation after generation after generation to come. It was a memorial to the success of obedience. What it means simply is that things go well when you trust God and you follow his words. And sometimes we need to be reminded about that. Israel needed to be reminded by memorials and Passover days and feasts to be reminded how good God is. Well, you think about that situation where Israel was reminded in the crossing of the Jordan on dry land about how important and powerful and authoritative God is. What's the takeaway in 2021? 12 memorial stones placed at the Jordan as a reminder, as a memorial to who God is. You know, when we pass by these cemeteries, they become a memorial to the freedom that we all enjoy. Many Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard have given their lives in various conflicts to protect our freedom. Should not be a day of recreation, but a day of freedom. It's not a day of enjoyment or partying. It's a day of solemn respect. It's a day of solemn respect. And all of our reflection days, all of our memorial days must be days where we are thankful to God for our freedom. And we reflect on the respect and honor to those who have given so much. My friends, don't go through the day one moment without thinking about those who've given their lives for you. This is a time to remember those who died keeping us free. This is a time, just like every reflection day, not to forget them, not to take their sacrifice for granted, like many often do by recreating and resting rather than respecting and reflecting. You know, it reminds me of in 2021 how often we treat God the way we treat God. God has done so much for you. God has done so much for me. But how soon we forget about God's goodness. How soon we fail to reflect on what God has done for us. We fail to focus on what he does for us each and every day, supplying our needs. How soon we forget about God's protection, his daily security, his safety, and his provisions. How soon we forget about how God prepped our redemption through Jesus Christ. That's probably the most important thing we forget. We don't reflect on it. We just go through life, enjoying, recreating, taking freedom. It's for granted. How soon we forget John 3:16. How soon we forget John 15:13, where it says, greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friends. Jesus took your place. How soon we forget and ignore the way. Jesus says, John 14:6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except by me. How soon we forget that he took our place. How soon we forget that he is the way. How soon we forget that he calls on you and I to remember the sacrifice, to remember the pain. My friends, where would we be if those millions of people lying in the cemeteries who've given their lives, where would we be had they not fought for freedom? Where would we be had Jesus not died on the cross for our sins? We would be men and women most miserable, without hope in this present world. In Luke 22, verses 17 to 30, Jesus calls on us to remember. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 25 to 29, we are called upon by the Apostle Paul to remember, not to forget, not to walk away, not to think about. We must take time to reflect on the freedom that we enjoy. We must take time to reflect on the salvation that's been given to us in Jesus Christ. These verses call for remembrance and self-examination and help us stay focused on God, focused on his power, focused on his promise, focused on the goodness, the protection, and the security and the freedom that we have in Jesus Christ. My friends, this is a day of reflection and respect, not a day of rest and recreation. So to close this out, I want to offer you a stone. Place that stone as a remembrance, not only to your freedom, but a remembrance to what Jesus Christ has done for you. Let this stone be a daily remembrance and a daily reminder of God's presence and his providence in your life. God has done so much for you and me. We must not forget it. And at the same time, we must not forget those great ones today who have given so much for you and for me. God bless you and keep you. We'll see you again next time on The Morning Touch.